Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Hello and welcome to another episode of Living the Dream with Curveball. I'm your host, Curveball, and today I am joined by Susan Amelian. She is an author, a motivational speaker, an attorney, as well as a nationally recognized expert that has been working to stop violence against women for the past 40 years. Susan, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Curtis.
Absolutely, it's my pleasure. Why don't you start off by telling everybody about you, giving a little background about yourself, anything that you want to tell the audience?
Okay, so as you mentioned, I'm an attorney. I've been practicing law, but I've also been doing a number of things that are probably somewhat unconventional for an attorney. I have been a journalist in my life. When I was a journalist, I realized back when I was much, much younger that I really wanted to be an advocate. I wanted to not just because journalists are supposed to be objective and tell both sides of the story, that I really wanted to become an advocate. And this is back in the early to mid 1970s, when the women's movement was very much a part of our lives. And I wanted to be an advocate for women. So that's really what brought me to law school. Law school brought me to the idea that I could become an advocate, and in particular to work on sex discrimination, not only in employment, which I ended up focusing a lot on, but also working on violence against women. So sexual harassment in the workplace, sexual assault. I did some work at during law school and after as a sexual assault advocate in court. And also I started after law school to represent women in the legal arena, particularly in family law cases where there was domestic violence. And during this period of time, which some of your viewers may not remember because they weren't around, this is back in the 70s, early 80s, that there was just a beginning of recognition for sexual assault victimization, domestic violence as a social problem, a public health issue. And so really, it was really exciting to be part of that, and frustrating because we couldn't get the things in place fast enough, but to begin to see the problem and address it. And then I spent about 10 years working in the state government. I live here in Connecticut, and doing public policy work on these issues. And then when I left government, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do next. I've always been a writer, so I was working on some book ideas. And then in October of 1999, my niece Maggie, who was a 19-year-old college student, was shot and killed by her ex-boyfriend, who also killed himself. And suddenly, all of the issues I had worked in, not that I didn't have empathy and understanding for the victims of these kinds of issues, but the issues became very personal and very immediate with Maggie's death. And I really felt I needed to do something to help other women, as Maggie could not move on, to help them move on. And so I started working with women in device workshops, and I now have materials that help women who've come through abuse take the journey from victim to survivor, and then on to being a thriver.
Well, let's talk about that in your own words. What does a thriver mean to you? What does that mean to be a thriver?
Well, it's a word that people have just begun to, I guess, articulate. Although I think the broadest definition is that when there's something that happens to you, some adversity, particularly in my case, a very violent and senseless kind of situation, that we don't want to get stuck in our anger and our need for revenge. Sometimes it's hard to get revenge because, like in my niece's case, this young man killed her and then killed himself. So I really was kind of trying to figure out, coming from a legal kind of mentality or mindset. How was I going to get revenge? And then I found this quote on the internet, because you Google things every so often and think, oh, maybe there's something here. And I got this quote: living well is the best revenge. And that was important not only for me, but I started thinking about it in terms of the women I was working with, that they must have that same idea, that they want to do more than just survive something. And living well is going to be the thing that something good will come out of it, and there'll be a bright future. So I see a thriver as somebody who takes up that moment of adversity and really starts to move to a different place, a more positive place, perhaps finds their purpose in life, which is what I have. And they believe that they will have a prosperous life ahead of them, despite all that's happened to them.
Is there a common thread for women who have experienced abuse with sexual violence and domestic violence? Is there a common thread in the process of moving forward for them?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's the journey that we're all on in some way, that I believe, particularly as I started writing novels, I've always been interested in stories, that in everybody's life, we're going to have a struggle. And that struggle can be abuse, it can be poverty, misfortune, could be a bad childhood. It could be a car accident that changes your ability for your body to operate the way it's been operating previous to that. And there's going to be a moment of transformation when we say, you know what, this is not going to tear me down. I'm going to keep going. And then the part that I call the happy ending. And that usually is the place where, like being a thriver, where you see that there is a place where you can go to, that there are things you can still have or want: peace and freedom and unconditional love. And for me, that place is meaningful work. And it took me years to realize that many of the things I did, even before Maggie was killed, was always seeking that meaningful work, meaning, to help and heal others, to accomplish something. And so for all of us, maybe our struggles, are more intense, or a lot of the women I work with, not just maybe their presenting issue is domestic violence, but there has been child abuse in their life, or other issues, other traumas. So they really are building on a number of things that they're having to overcome. I've also done work with domestic violence offenders, mostly men, and they will tell me about their trauma histories, that they will go back and talk about being exposed to domestic violence themselves as children, maybe child abuse. So we all have this struggle, and for some people, and particularly the women I work with, it may be harder because there's so much that's happened to them, and they really have lost their hope for the future. And that's what I hope. That's what I try to give them, is hope. And once I get them that energy spinning again, the positive energy, the belief that they can do anything. They've already done incredible things just to get through what they've gotten through. Um, and they have some place they can go in the future.
Well, speaking of the struggle, how does a woman go from the abuse that they have endured throughout their life, and how do they get past being a victim and go to the thriver mode that you talk about?
Well, there's probably lots of ways that people could define it. And for some people, just the articulation, they could say, oh, yeah, that's right. I did do that. And I've had women come up to me when I passed out my flyers or talked about my work, oh, that happened to me 20 years ago. And yeah, I didn't know I was a thriver, but I was determined that I was going to move forward and find something better and healthier, and for myself and my children. The way I talk about it in the work that I do, the workshops that I do, and the books that I've put together, is I think there are 7 steps to go from victim to, well, from survivor to thriver. Most of the women I work with who come into my workshops, or who I start to work and coach, are someplace in the thrivers, in the survivor stage. And they're actually pretty close to the idea that they want to move on, but they don't know how to do it. So the first thing I work with them on is that for them to see their journey, that they're on a journey, which we just talked about, struggle to transformation to happy ending, victim to survivor to thriver, to quiet down the negative voice in their head, which has sometimes been fed by the abuser. You're not good enough. You're, fat and stupid. No one's ever going to love you. And then bring up the happy person inside. I call it the positive part, and begin to take that positive energy to set new goals for themselves, vision a new life, and really try to overcome any limiting beliefs about themselves. So I'll never go back to school. I'm not smart enough, and really take that step into that new goal. And maybe it's a small step into a new goal, and then you get that one done, and another one, and another one. And I've had women start singing again and going back to school, starting their own businesses, really taking their place in the world once again. And that's, I think, the process. It's a human process. I think what happens is that we forget and we get stuck somewhere. And so I really try to help women get unstuck.
What steps or what exercises can help a woman thrive after abuse or get through all the things that they went through?
I think one of the things I don't have the women do, either in my workshops or in the books that I have, I don't have them go back through their story. I think it's important for them to tell that story, particularly in the victim part. They need to get help and they need to get out of the crisis, but to keep going back over the story, particularly the part of the victimization, will usually keep women in that space of feeling frozen and feeling overwhelmed. One of the exercises that I do in helping them to get the negative voice to quiet down is to take a piece of paper and draw a line down the center on the left hand side, left column. Write down all the negative stuff in your head. I'll never get my life together. I'm not strong enough. I'm not a good mother. And then the right hand side of the page, take a breath, and on that right hand side, see if you can write a positive response to that. And just that, recognizing that that voice is in your head and you have a response to it, can help you realize that the negative voice is not the only voice. There's a positive voice, a part of us, that the human experience, that believes we can be positive, that we have resiliency. Resiliency is the ability to stretch the rubber band and it always comes back. It always snaps back. We have that resiliency as part of our human condition, and to remind yourself of that. And when that negative voice comes up, no, I've got something to say about that, and here's the positive side. And to keep those kinds of affirmations: I am strong, I am capable, I can do it. And it's similar to, affirmations are similar to the work in the 12-step program. Affirmations keep you in that positive space. And that's one of the exercises that I've used with the women.
What other tips would you give women who want to live a life of power and purpose after surviving domestic violence and sexual
Oh,
assault and different kinds
I,
of abuse?
I love that, power and purpose. Yeah, and that's what I think we have to work on, not just women, but everyone. But I particularly have been helping women. I think what they need to understand is that they do have positive patterns in their life. I believe a woman who can leave an abusive relationship, particularly if there's physical violence involved, if you can do that, if you can get all the powers in your head and all the get rid of that negative voice and whatever it is, and do the things you have to do, you can do about anything. And I always, set my marker. The When something new comes in my life that I think is difficult to do, like coming on a podcast and talking about my work, I always think, okay, is that harder than something else I've done? And when I've had some real challenges in my life, the marker for me is, is it harder than what I had to deal with after my niece was murdered? And usually the answer is no. And then I say, okay, I did that, I can do this. And so it's really realizing that we as human beings have the capacity to move through almost anything. And we see that with great examples in our society on a regular basis. People who've have terrible things happen to them or have faced real adversity. And then we wonder, how do they do that? And so they are our role models of how you can do that. Maybe you don't have the same experience they have, or the same challenge, but you can see that they got through it. And because they got through it, it can help you to see that you can get through it too.
What advice would you have for men who are trying to get through trauma that they faced in their life that may have contributed to being abusive towards women?
Mhm. I have done some work with male offenders, domestic violence offenders, and first of all, I tell them they are on a journey, and the struggles are the same. I think for a lot of men, they don't have role models about how men are supposed to, good men are supposed to act. So I always suggest that we talk about role models and who's a good role model, not only as a man, but also as a father, or how how you show respect to women, and begin to understand that what's happened to you is part of the human experience, and what is it you want to have as your legacy, and what is it that you was lacking in your ability to see those pieces that the way you should approach things, the way men are socialized in our society. Sometimes those are strengths that men learn, but there are also things that men learn about, not showing your emotions. The only emotion you can show is anger. And for some men who didn't have a role model about how to deal with their anger, that anger can be expressed by violence. And that's usually when I work with men who have been arrested for domestic violence. That's the place where we really start. So these what you've been doing and the way you've been managing that is not working for you. So let's see if we can find some other patterns. And once again, pulling up some positive patterns in other parts of their life. So, we're all in a human journey. So that is not different between men and women, but men and women are socialized different in our society. And sometimes we're given strengths in that socialization. And sometimes we're given things that are not as helpful, or that we don't have enough role models about communication and really getting what we want. I always tell the guys in my offender groups that what you're looking for in a relationship is love, and that, but doing power and control is not going to get you there. And then they want to know, well, what does? And that's really where the conversation and the education begins.
Talk about your two book series, the Thriver Zone series and the Best
Mm-hmm,
Revenge series.
mm-hmm.
How are they different? And just kind of give us a brief overview of those book
Okay.
series.
So the Thriver Zone series is basically comes from the journey from victim to survivor to thriver. So I thought that what I could do in the three books, and I just put out the third one. So it's entering the Thriver Zone, entering the Thriver Zone, staying in the Thriver Zone, and living in the Thriver Zone. So entering, the first book talks about the 7 steps that I just sort of quickly went through, and has the exercises and some sample writings from women who've come through my workshop, and a couple of Thriver success stories. Staying in the Thriver Zone really helps to work on a focused desire and pushing through your fear, and talking about how you get the things that you want in life, the new goals and the new desires. And the third book is called Living in the Thriver Zone. Living Well is the Best Revenge, or a celebration of living well as the best revenge. And that's really, I interviewed 7 women from my programs over the years, the last 20 years, and asked them what they got out of the program and the materials, and how are they living today, how are they living well. So it's really kind of a compact trilogy of self-help to get through, get beyond abuse and to thrive. The Best Revenge series is actually is a 2-book series now. I'm working on the 3rd book. It's a novel series. And one of the things I wanted to do after my niece's murder is write something about her story that might be helpful to others. So I did it in fiction. I loosely inspired by her story, but it's really a story that shows not only the first book called Awaken, the awakening of the human spirit to the healing journey. It's sort of set in the same scenario as my niece's story, a young woman who's killed by her ex-boyfriend, and then it moves into the longer journey. The second book is called Emerge, the opening to the power of love. And the 3rd book is coming out soon. It's going to be called Thrive. So it's really been an opportunity for through story to help people see the warning signs of abuse, talk about the journey. And some people, I find, myself included, that stories help, are an easier way for people to get some of the education they need and to also see and enjoy the way the story evolves and the characters also evolve.
Besides your 3rd book, are there any other projects that you're currently working on? Any upcoming speaking engagements or just anything that you might be working on?
Yeah, so writers are always writing a book. So right now I'm working on a facilitator's guide. I do have a number of programs and people who are advocates with women who are interested in and are using and are interested in using my materials in the Thriver Zone books. So I'm putting together a facilitator's guide. I also regularly do training with staff and programs. I do have people like therapists and counselors who have bought my books and use some of the materials, if maybe not all the materials. What they like about the books, the therapists and counselors, is that they regularly don't do a lot of visioning with their clients. They like the idea their clients start to see a vision for themselves in the future and then moving through it. I'm also been working on the 3rd book in the series, and I've also been working on a book that I think will be more about the whole healing process. So there's so much more, particularly in the COVID time that we're in, that people are going through grief and loss. And the process that I was talking about, that resilience, how do you bounce back and what are those qualities and who are some of our role models that are out there, like Nelson Mandela is one of the people that's interesting to me. He faced great struggle and trauma and came out of it, came through it with the idea that not only would he move his country forward, but he would, I guess the word be forgive the people that did what they did to him. And for a lot of the women, that's where we kind of get stuck in I call it the F word, the forgiveness word. And I don't know that you have to forgive people necessarily that have harmed you in the traditional sense, but I think letting go of your anger in some ways, putting that energy someplace else is really important to me. And I've been thinking about writing about that some more, or at least giving some more attention to the idea that we need to do more of this in our society, and we'll be a better society.
Go ahead and throw out your contact information. Let people know how
Okay.
we can get the books as well as what formats they're available in, any website or social media links.
Okay, so my main website is called the Thriver Zone, or actually it's www.thriverzone.com, and on there you can buy my books. They're also available on Amazon, but if you buy them through my website, I can autograph them for you. And on the website, there's also some free material, some of the worksheets that I use, and some of the information about the workshops that I do. And I do workshops about 4 times a year. I've been doing them virtually the last year here, which means I've been doing them on Zoom. So they're available to women at this point. And I've also do a lot of training. So if there's anybody out there who would like to be involved in some training about the materials that I use, or just in general about this whole concept, of how we can help people move from victim to survivor to thriver, I can be contacted by at my email address, which is susan@thriverzone.com. I'm also on Facebook. I think my Facebook page is called Take the Journey. And I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter under the Thriver Zone.
Are there any topics that we didn't discuss that you would like to touch on before we go?
I don't think so. I think what I'm interested in is that people see that there is a path forward, and that and it may, some people who've read my materials or read my books realize that it applies more to women. I felt very strongly that women who have come through abuse is a category of readers or people seeking material that is not usually focused on. So I wanted to be able to do that. But I want people, my goal in life, I guess, my purpose is to have people understand, as I've understood, that there is a journey. We're all on a journey, and that if we can get to that thriver place, however we define it, we can do some amazing good in the world, and also find the purpose why we are here. I believe we're all here for a purpose. I believe we're all here to help each other. And the more I can help somebody else, the more it means that I have fulfilled that purpose. So that's really a message that I think is the most universal and the most important to our times right now.
Absolutely. Understood. Ladies and gentlemen, Susan Amelian. Susan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me here, and let's all get out there and thrive.
Absolutely. And listeners, after checking out the show, go rate and review on your favorite podcast platform. For more information on the Living the Dream podcast, visit www.djcurveball.com. Until next time, stay focused on living the dream.